Colin Smith hadn't reached his second birthday when he was infected with HIV. His parents didn't know. They thought the injections he'd been given were helping to make his life better. Colin's life was a short one. At 7, he was dead. What killed him was the contaminated blood products used to treat his haemophilia.
You know, and that's how he was all the time. Smile, always smiling, that good. Even if he had to bleed, you know, he'd just say, oh, get the factor VIII, you know, because that was his lifeline, wasn't it? And that's what killed him.
His wasn't the only life shattered like this.
We were obviously just used as guinea pigs for research into the AIDS virus.
We've had over 1,000 deaths now in this country, and there will be many more people dying of HIV and hepatitis C.
By the end of '84, I was still asking my consultant, is the product safe to use? Is there anything I should be concerned about? And the answers were always no.
I want closure, perhaps, and a sorry, because I think if they've been underhanded in any way, then children don't deserve that.
From the early 1970s to the mid-1980s, 4,500 haemophiliacs in the UK were infected with lethal viruses in the blood products designed to help them. 2,000 have since died from hepatitis C or HIV. That much is known, but what really happened? There's never been a proper public inquiry in Britain to ask if our scientists ignored warnings, or if they exploited haemophiliacs for scientific kudos, or if our politicians put cutting costs before saving lives. Now Newsnight's had access to fresh evidence from those years, and it makes for uncomfortable reading. People with haemophilia lack blood clotting agents, so can bleed painfully, not just from a cut, but into their joints and internally. Until the 1950s there was no treatment, but since then injections of blood products have helped. Early versions, such as an extract called cryoprecipitate, were cumbersome and meant a trip to hospital. But in the 1970s something new arrived, a concentrated solution they could inject at home, called factor VIII.
Well, the factor VIII was more convenient, just that you didn't have to go up to hospital to get treatment. You could take the treatment home with you, keep it in the fridge.
What haemophiliacs didn't know was that the majority of the plasma used to make factor VIII came from places like this US prison in Arkansas, which paid each donor $2 for their blood and sold it on for up to 70. The prisoners themselves ran the blood service. Many were allowed to donate despite the obvious risk of spreading infection. Carol Grayson lost her husband just 2 years ago this week. He was given blood products from that very prison. She's just finished a research thesis on how thousands of haemophiliacs in the UK became infected.
They bought from the most high-risk donors. That they failed to take notice of warnings when key scientists and doctors, warned them the dangers of importing blood. That they failed to invest in UK services.
One of the victims of that underinvestment was what's now known as the Bioproducts Laboratory in Elstree. This building is central to the story, the government-owned factory for NHS blood products. It's under new management now and it's been upgraded, but in the 70s it was struggling to survive. Cash was short, and one inspector's report said its practices were so bad, if it had been a commercial organisation it would have been shut down. This is where things started to go wrong. The health minister at the time was David, now Lord Owen. He secured extra funding for Elstree to help avoid blood donations from abroad that he says he knew were dangerous. In 1975 he told Parliament about the extra money, but later found out it hadn't been spent.
I was Foreign Secretary in '78 and I just assumed by then probably we were self-sufficient. I wouldn't have been too surprised if it had slipped to '79. But then in the early '80s I discovered not only were we not self-sufficient, but we were actually more dependent than we'd been.
He remains furious that Parliament wasn't told that Elstree had not had the money it needed to keep up with demand. He says not only was an important democratic principle violated, but lives put at risk.
If we had gone for self-sufficiency, I am pretty confident that we would have had a substantial reduction in the number of contaminated blood supplies. It wouldn't have completely ruled it out, but I think much fewer people would have got hepatitis C, and also fewer people would have got AIDS.
This story has been bedevilled by documents that have gone missing. Lord Owen's, to his horror, weren't kept. Even more mysteriously, many of the official documents from those crucial years during the early 1980s have also disappeared. 2 years ago, the government claimed the documents had been shredded by a junior member of staff, but some copies remained intact. Carol Grayson unearthed them in the vaults of her solicitor's office in Newcastle. The Department of Health asked for them back, but not before Carol had photocopied many of them. She says many of these have never before been made public. Carol and Pete were looking for answers, but for Pete it had come too late. He deteriorated shortly afterwards, and his death, when it came, was not dignified.
He knew that he had very short time left, because they'd asked him to sign this do not resuscitate, because they said there was no point. And we actually talked about that, and that was really distressing, because he said, I told them to wait for you to come, because you always make decisions with me. He said, I don't know what you think. He said, I've just signed to tell them, not to resuscitate me. And he said, so I've only got like a short time left.
Pete, in common with other haemophiliacs, had multiple infections. Some joke about having the full portfolio of viruses.
My husband was one person receiving treatment, and during the course of his treatment he was infected with HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, then had 6 exposures to CJD, and then ended up in his final days getting C. difficile in hospital.
The documents Carol unearthed went back to the government, but it's so far refused to release these on grounds of commercial confidentiality. They came too late to be included in the official story of the failure over self-sufficiency. Successive governments have said that scientists, civil servants and politicians simply didn't know enough about the dangers of factor VIII concentrates to stop using them. But the documents we've seen suggest that everyone knew a lot more a lot earlier than they've ever admitted, with fears over hepatitis C as early as 1976 and over AIDS as early as 1982. One of the most shocking is this letter from the head of public surveillance at the time, warning about the risk of AIDS in factor VIII after Britain's first case in Cardiff, and calling for all US imports to be banned. Now, this was in May 1983, before most UK haemophiliacs were infected with HIV. In spite of this warning, factor VIII imports were not banned, and thousands of haemophiliacs are still living with the consequences. Haydn Lewis is one of them. He's already lost a haemophiliac uncle to HIV, and his brother has both HIV and hepatitis C. In 1985, with 2 young children, he was told that he too had contracted HIV. When Haydn decided to check his medical records, he was shocked to find he'd been infected a year earlier.
From June 84 until February 85, there was no mention that I was positive by my consultant. And through that period, I could have infected my wife, or my children for that matter.
After that, Haydn took extreme precautions to protect his wife Gaynor, and says there's no way he could have infected her. But a test confirmed their worst fears. She too was HIV positive.
I just wouldn't accept what I think I suspected, and I just kept going, I'm not even going to discuss it or think about it until I get told, and then I'll deal with it. It was pretty bad, and Gaynor was brilliant, because if anyone should have been upset, it should have been Gaynor. But I was the one that was emotionally out of control.